welcome to the 416 Ministries. This is the interview series, and so today we're sitting down with Jesse LeMay, and we're in Sandpoint, Idaho, and we just had a good meal together, and we just wanted to take a moment and introduce Jesse and to talk about his family a little bit, talk about the work here. So Jesse, if you will, introduce yourself and tell us who you are and your family and where we are.
Yeah. Well, as Wayne said, my name's Jesse LeMay, and we're in North Idaho, Sandpoint, Idaho. If you've ever been to Coeur d'Alene, it's about 45 minutes north of Coeur d'Alene. They're on I-90 and about an hour and a half from Spokane, Washington. But beautiful North Idaho, and it's a nice day here on Memorial Day, and my wife and I have been here for about a year. So we moved here last August from St. Augustine, Florida, and we've been in full-time ministry for close to a decade now. But we've got a 2-year-old daughter, Alethea, and my wife's also 9 months pregnant. So any day now we'll have our second daughter, Lord willing, and so we're excited about that. But yeah, we love being up here in North Idaho. I know we'll talk a little bit more about that, but also the church up here as well, and so we're thankful and excited to be here.
So tell me a little bit about your background. You know, we were talking about not growing up in the church, and we talked about not having kind of that same experience. So talk about kind of how you came to the truth a little bit, and kind of give us a little bit of that background, and then what led you to want to preach even.
Yeah, those are both great questions, and as we all do, I had my own journey, and I did not grow up in the church, and my mother had grown up in the church, but she had fallen away, and so when she was raising us, we weren't raised in that environment. And by the time I was a teenager, I actually considered myself an atheist, and so that led into my early and mid-20s, and just some experiences I'd gone through in life that just really made me bitter at the world and hardened my heart pretty bad. And I was really down a dark path, and so far away from God that there was just a lot of despair and just bleak outlook on life. But I had a place really in life to where there wasn't much worse I could go down, and so it was real kind of a point of reflection. At that point, I'd come to a place to accept that there had to be a creator, and so I guess maybe whether just life experiences or maturation or maybe God working on me, other people, family too, and where I was in my life, I made a commitment that if and when I got out of that position I was in, that I was going to dedicate my life to finding God, whoever He was, and seeking Him and seeking His truth. And that's what I've done since that time forward, and that was about 13 years ago. And so I fully immersed myself in all sorts of religious material I could find, and from books to stuff on the internet to talking with people, and I studied a bunch of different religions, Hinduism and Islam. I had for several years had a business partner and a good friend of mine that I lived with and worked with who him and his family were Muslims, and so I was exposed to that for pretty in-depth for a while, and so I saw their dedication to it, and that to me that was impactful, that they were that dedicated and truly believed in that to that extent. And so I thought, maybe that was the path. And so I studied Islam and Hinduism and Judaism and Christianity, and really started reading the Bible and a lot of other extra biblical materials about Jesus and the scriptures and just different people in the Bible. And as anybody who's ever studied the Bible knows, that it's different, and it began to work on me, and I started to see more and more truth in it, and finally came to a place to believe what I was reading, and believe that Jesus was who He said He was, and who His apostles said He was. And I was reading Acts one day, and through other conversations I'd had too with my mother, who had ended up being restored. I said that she had fallen away, but thankfully she, after a divorce, she remarried my stepfather, and so they became faithful members of the church again, and so they had conversations with me, but so they were planting seeds and watering seeds, and a lot of times in which it had been a lot of me trying to disprove a lot of their beliefs, over those years. But so they had been also working on me, but as I said, I was come to have faith and believe, and then just reading Acts and realizing all these people that are believing are being baptized, and so that's what I realized, that I was yet lacking, and that I needed to be baptized to have my sins washed away, and so I went into the preacher's office there in Oklahoma, and where I was at, and said I need to be baptized, and so it was actually my stepdad who was preaching at the time in Guthrie, Oklahoma, and he was pretty shocked. Said, "Are you sure about this? Let's talk about this." And so we did for a little bit, and I was baptized that day, and it was like a Tuesday afternoon, and then it was, I don't even know if it was 2 weeks after that, to where, again, just reading, I was fully immersing myself in as much Bible I could get my hands on, and good faithful material, and just realizing everybody that I'm reading about is in some way or another sharing their faith and their the transformation that God has brought them, and the salvation with others around them. And I guess I was just so devoid of truth for so long, and I didn't feel confident, first of all, in my own holistic faith going forward, but also to be able to share it with others. And I wanted to tell others and share the truth that I had now found with others. I didn't think I was going to be a preacher, so I just thought maybe I can go learn and go to school and gain some knowledge in the Bible, and then maybe go do foreign mission work somewhere in some capacity. And so that's when I applied for Bear Valley. My stepdad had gone to Bear Valley, and he was familiar with it through the preacher that baptized him, Joe Slater. He's a Bear Valley graduate. He's been working in Justin, Texas for several years. But so I applied to Bear Valley and went there in 2014 and graduated in 2015. So
nice. Where did you and Nadia meet?
So we met at Bear Valley.
At Bear Valley.
Yeah,
Okay.
so my wife.
I was thinking that, but I didn't want to assume that.
Yeah, my wife Nadia, she's from Australia, from Perth, Australia, but she decided she was just going to take one semester off and come to the States and study for a semester at Bear Valley.
Oh, that's cool.
And she's been here for 10 years. So, and we've got 2 kids. So
that's awesome.
Yep.
And so when you think about moving to Sandpoint, and y'all been here, said right at a year, and so obviously this is a different part of the world, a different part of the country.
Yes, it is.
Than St. Augustine, Florida, and being growing up and going to St. Augustine, going to Jacksonville in that area, and even preaching in Jacksonville for a time. This is very different. What's been your experience here? Not just the church, but just, this is a neat place. I love it. So.
Yes, it is. It's different in several ways. Obviously, topographically, geographically, we're almost in Canada, and so the weather's different. It's vastly different from Florida, but it's different culturally as well. And I think a couple things when we first came up here was just how friendly a lot of the people are in town, and eager to speak to you, whether you're at the grocery store or restaurant. But also, the first day we moved into town, we hadn't even unloaded the truck yet, and there was a Bible study that I was just happened to walk upon downtown, and one of the food trucks, and had a Bible study there for about an hour and a half. And
that's cool.
Yeah, and so it's just things like that, and there's something that it's been referenced for several years now, called the Great American Readout. And so it's interesting in that a lot of people who are up here and do move up here, they're very independent, and a lot of them do want to kind of live out in the mountains and the woods, but at the same time, they want to get back to a lot of our American cultural heritage and faith and what built this country in a lot of people's eyes, which is the Christian foundation and spiritual spiritual foundations in our lives and in our families, and so that's very much present up here as well. And it's a little bit slower pace of life than Florida.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
Well, and it is refreshing, to meet people in the area and to see people who are seeking and who are open to talking. That's not always the case, and even in the Bible Belt, trying to find people that are wanting to talk about Scripture and wanting to talk about the Bible and willing to just, start having a Bible study right off the bat, So it is a neat area in that way. There's a very openness to one another, and I just find that very refreshing. And it's something that we've picked up on, kind of being in the area. And I think that even, to me, that's spilled over into the church here too. I mean, you see that culture in the congregation at Sandpoint as well. So let's talk about Sandpoint and the work there. And if you were to highlight kind of the work, how would you go about doing that? Just what would you say if you could summarize the work in just a couple of sentences? How would you do that?
Well, like you said, it's the culture has made its way into the church. The church here is actually it's interesting because while some of the Christians are new Christians, some are new to this congregation, whether they've moved here or came from a different local congregation. It's a very young congregation in that sense, to where we haven't spent years together. Even some of the longest people have been here have only been a few years, and we don't have elders, no deacons, and so that's something we're working on, and so that poses its own challenges, but it's also something we noticed right away, similar to, again, coming into town, was just the genuine sincerity of people wanting to spend time with the brethren and spend time with other Christians, and whether it's staying after for an hour on a Wednesday night just to chat, instead of running off, or having meals together. We have a meal every Wednesday before Bible class, with the congregation, and so just things like that. I'd say one difference as well is that we really joined another ministry team, and we're part of a ministry team. Marty and Julie Johnson have been up here for several years serving the Lord and preaching and teaching. They were former missionaries in Indonesia and Utah, and so they've been up here. In fact, they're some of the longest tenured Christians at the congregation, and so we're excited to be a part of the team up here, and but it's great to be able to learn from them and utilize each other's strengths and experiences.
One of the things, and we were talking between Bible class and worship, and we were standing at the back and just kind of looking, through the congregation there, and just everybody in the middle, just talking and just being together, and they were excited to be together, and that spilled over even afterwards. We had a meal together and things like that. But you could see a love for one another. You could see people wanted to genuinely be around one another, and not really wanting to leave, And so that's always a good sign. But there is a genuine family feel in the congregation at Sandpoint. That was our take, kind of visiting and just kind of from the outside looking in, just being here for one weekend. But and you mentioned, thinking about compared to maybe other areas, is there a particular struggle that you think kind of stands out, makes either the work difficult or makes the area of work difficult?
Yeah, for me, I think there's maybe a couple ways in that, as most things do, there's pros and cons. And so some of the pros of what I think culturally is up here, of people having independence and wanting to come, and it also makes its way into the church, and that they can be very strong-headed and independent and isolated as well. And so one thing is we're very spread out, from whether an hour north or an hour south or an hour east or west. We've got people across the Washington line, and so it's a challenge in being able to fellowship. And so it's very encouraging to see people being willing to drive that far to do that. But I think also just the experiences that others have had over the last several years is that when problems have arisen, whether divisions in the church, that people can.
Let me get this out.
Okay. Can you ask? It's all right. Is that they can just clam up and just retreat and say, well, I can either just spend time by myself, or I can go to a different congregation. And in some sense that's true in a lot of places around the country, because we do have so many congregations in the South and others that they can just drive 10 minutes down the road. But I think to me that's probably one of the biggest ones. And the other is that there is a lack of other congregations to fellowship with and to help strengthen and encourage one another, and so most of the congregations are smaller in size, and it's so at times it can be a challenge to see and spend time with other brethren, and so I think that's also a challenge. And we're so spread out, compared to, again, whether it's in Kansas or Oklahoma or Texas or the South. There's just fewer congregations.
Right. I think Cindy has a question. She's behind the camera, so.
So I'd like to find out how people deal with discouragement, and especially as a preacher family, or just a family that has moved some, and Nadia's away from her family. When you've gone through a discouraging time, what's something that maybe someone did for you, or something that you always lean on, maybe scripture or something that helps you get through those hard times?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, and certainly over the last 4 or 5 years, a lot of people in the world and in the church too, but preachers, I think specifically, have faced a lot of challenges, because of COVID and all the the political divisions in our country and the things we've gone through, and which have made their way into the church. And a lot of preachers have left ministry, and or been either chose to leave congregations or been asked to leave congregations. And we certainly weren't exempt from some of those things, and so it's been a great challenge. And I guess trying to find encouragement, it's come in several ways. I think first would be my wife, and her being there and being a part of it and being an encouragement, and being scripturally grounded and spiritually solid is a big part of it, and knowing why we wanted to get married and why we wanted to be in ministry, and why we wanted to be where we were, and know that while we wanted to be and remain where we were, and so we could work anywhere, and still serve God anywhere. But as you said, her being away from her family, we just went a couple months ago back to visit her family in Australia, and it's about a 25, 27 hour trip with all the different layovers and things, and so it's been difficult, but we have family wherever we're at, and it's and her family are Christians, and so that helps a lot, and they understand, and I mean they miss her, and us and our daughter, but they understand the work. And in addition, I'd say two other things. The other is having other ministers, whether I was in school with them or have gained relationships with over the years, to be able to lean on and call and talk to them about some of the same stuff they were going through and how they're handling it. And I think the greatest one of all, though, is Scripture itself, and whether it's a certain passage or I think maybe even just in a holistic sense of knowing that no matter what's happening in our world, that these books and these verses and these passages and these truths are never changing. And so our world can be, turned upside down in a bad way, not in the way that Paul and those did it in Thessalonica, but to know that, as Jesus said, He is the same. And so that brings peace and comfort and encouragement to know that, well, we still have the same mission, we still have the same words. And
I think always, I know for us, if we were going through a hard time, but the church where we were helped us feel like we were part of the family there.
Yeah.
That always helped us get through struggles.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I agree 100%, but you can find that both ways, and sometimes that can be some of the hardest things to get through is when, your family, you feel like, and like any family, families don't always get along, and we can allow things to cloud our vision. And so while that's one of the greatest blessings, I think, and encouragements in the church and being part of the Lord's church is to have that spiritual family. Sometimes they can bring some of the biggest heartaches.
Everybody's human.
Right.
Yeah.
But yes, keeping that grounded spiritually is important to remember the Scripture. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, and I think about that kind of encouragement, a family atmosphere within the congregation. The idea of leaning on brethren that you've either gone to school with, or at least through ministry that you've worked beside through things through the years. That they're there for you, going through the very same things. Typically, maybe not exactly, but they're going through hardships and they're going through difficulties, and then that spills over into as Christians, we're all going through those things, and we can understand that. Having that openness, at least to be able to share that with brethren that we can trust, that'll care for us and watch out. When we're a little bit low, they'll be there to pick us up, and vice versa. That's a huge part of this, and we see that in as a family, throughout the kingdom, and I think that's important. Is there anything else you want to highlight about the work of the church here, or let people know? Come on and move this way.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, it's there's few in numbers, and not just the church, but all around, and but it's a great place to work, and the Northwest in general. In fact, talking about Bear Valley, if you're not familiar with the Bear Valley Bible Institute in Denver, Colorado, it was initially founded by the eldership of the Bear Valley congregation in the mid-'60s, but with the whole premise of training preachers to come up to the Pacific Northwest. And over the years, that's shifted down to the Bible Belt, and so there's not as many guys coming up here. But it really is a mission field. I mean, everywhere is, that's true, but it has more of a mission field feel, just because there are fewer congregations. Most of the congregations are smaller in number.
Even seemingly fewer denominational groups.
Yeah.
Or at least there's not 15 different Baptist groups in the,
right.
in the local area. There may be one or two, but
yeah.
It's when you get down in the South, it's every corner's got a different brand or something. So and I think that's and I think that too has been something that we try to look, even for Memphis grads or anyone. There are works that are open and needing preachers in this area as well. So, and not only preachers, we need families to move. Good faithful families that would be willing to move and help congregations. As did the Johnsons and others. To help build up an area. So, Jesse, thank you for sitting down with us. Appreciate your time and the hospitality. Thank you for the food. Excellent barbecue man right here. He's had some ribs, yeah, and I couldn't think. I was thinking about the brats earlier because I got stuck on the brats for a moment there a little while ago. But anyway, thank you for sitting down with us and watching, and we'll see you further down the road.